Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 249. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you had a good weekend. I'm not going to delay. I want to get right into today's podcast because I have a lot to share with you guys today. We are going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast, but I want to start with this short video, and this will get us going for today. Thank you again for joining.
When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." John 2:13 through 16.
So I wanted to start with this passage, very famous passage from the Bible, from the book of John, where Jesus creates a whip and drives out the money changers. What was going on here at the temple? Why are all these animals at the temple and being sold? Is because the temple sacrifice was at the center of Jewish culture during the times of Jesus. The temple itself was at the center of Jewish culture during the time of Jesus. Everything was about the temple. The center of the temple, which this portion of the temple, which is called the holiest of holies, is where Jews believed that where God dwelled, where God on earth, he would manifest himself only in this place in the center of the temple called the holiest of holies. That's why the temple was everything to the Jews and to the Jewish religion. This story is so reminiscent, if you know the story of Hanukkah and the Maccabees, because the reason that Jesus is driving out these money changers in front of that were there in front of the temple, selling animals to people that were coming there and were acting on their faith and the demands that God had given them in the Torah to once a year come to the temple and to bring a sacrifice for the remission of their sins. They were being faithful to that, and they were being taken advantage of by other Jews, other members of their community that were taking advantage of them and basically profiting off of them. They were inspecting their sacrifice when they would bring their sacrifice to the temple. And if they see a blemish or something on the sacrifice, they would reject the sacrifice and say that, no, we can't accept this sacrifice, but we have a perfectly unblemished sacrifice right here that we're willing to sell you. It was a scam that was going on. And Jesus, he in this story, he says that they were defiling the temple. The temple was his Father's house, is what the story says and what the passage says. And again, this reminds me so much of the Maccabees and the story of Hanukkah, because if you know the story of Hanukkah, the reason that the Maccabees rose up and revolted against Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greeks is because they had defiled the temple. If you don't know the story of the Maccabees, you shouldn't be ashamed, because Kamala Harris's own husband, who is Jewish, doesn't know the Hanukkah story and the story of the Maccabees. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but this happened last year during Hanukkah, where this is the headline: Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff mangles the story of Hanukkah in since-deleted social media post. And he put this post out on X, Twitter, Kamala Harris's Jewish husband, second gentleman Doug Emhoff, the better half of Kamala Harris, bungled the history behind Hanukkah Monday in since-deleted social media posts where he attempted to explain why Jewish people celebrate the ancient miracle. And this is his post in quotes. Here, let's read it down here so you can see the picture that Kamala Harris's Jewish husband doesn't know the story of Hanukkah. And he had to delete this tweet. Actually, let's go up here and read it. It says the story of Hanukkah is a story of Jewish people has always been one of hope and resilience. Emhoff, who is Jewish, wrote on X. In the Hanukkah story, the Jewish people were forced into hiding. The Jewish people were forced into hiding. Kamala Harris's Jewish husband thinks that the Maccabees were forced into hiding. No one thought that they would survive, or that the few drops of oil that they had would last, but they survived and the oil kept burning, he added. During those 8 days, this is him tweeting, I guess had to be multiple tweets, or maybe it's two. They have pictures of the tweets down at the bottom of this article. During these 8 days of hiding, the Maccabees hiding again, they recited their prayers and continued their traditions. That's what Hanukkah means, dedication. It was during those dark nights that the Maccabees dedicated themselves. They dedicated themselves to maintaining the hope and the faith in the oil. The faith in the oil, each other, and their Judaism. These dark times, I think that this story, Emhoff concludes. If you know the story of Hanukkah, you know that is absolutely ridiculous. And this guy was railed. They forced him to delete the tweet, as he should. But the fact that this guy doesn't know the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabees weren't hiding. The Maccabees were kicking butt. That's what they were doing. They were kicking butt the same way Jesus was kicking butt in the book of John, because the temple had been defiled. In the book of John, when Jesus is kicking butt and whipping these money changers away from the temple to protect the sacred temple, to cleanse the temple of these money changers. These people were taking advantage of people and defiling the temple, is what Jesus says. But that's exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes did when he desecrated the temple, same temple, and the Maccabees went kicking butt, just like Jesus. They weren't hiding. Some of the comments that forced Kamala Harris's Jewish husband to delete this tweet. And here's one right here. I'm really hoping the second gentleman left this to some hapless, uneducated intern who couldn't be bothered to even consult Wikipedia. Wow. From the guy from the Heritage Foundation. Yikes, man. You really mangled this story. How could you mangle this story? And the really interesting thing is that now that this guy, Kamala Harris's Jewish husband, is criticizing Donald Trump, saying that Donald Trump is anti-Semitic and he's leading the effort against anti-Semitism. You don't even know the story of Hanukkah, buddy. You don't even know the story of Hanukkah. Here's another comment that forced him to delete the tweet. How could this happen? Senior writer from National Enquirer wondered, how can this happen? It's inexplicable in general, but at this point in this environment, it is so ponderously inept. I don't even understand what this guy is saying here. So ponderously inept could only be enemy action. There are saboteurs at work here. So he's blaming, gotta be it. He's blaming the tweet and what Kamala Harris's Jewish husband wrote on saboteurs. Somebody must have taken over his account. How could this guy not know the story of Hanukkah? How could he think the Maccabees were hiding? Here's another comment. Wait, what? The story of Hanukkah is not a story of hiding, but of winning a war, a story of faith, a story of reestablishing Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel is what the Maccabees did. The Maccabees established the first Jewish nation since the Babylonian captivity. There hadn't been a Jewish nation that was run and controlled in the land of Israel since Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian captivities. The Maccabees didn't hide; they established that first nation. Now, it didn't last long. The Romans came and took it over and conquered that land, but it was the Maccabees. They weren't hiding; they were cleansing God's temple the same way Jesus was in the book of John from these money changers. So how could Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's Jewish husband, not know the Hanukkah story? Well, Kamala Harris's husband is what we call secular Jews, because you can be religious Jew or you can be a secular Jew. You can be a Jew, because you're born into a Jewish family. You keep all the Jewish customs. You're circumcised. You're bar mitzvahed. You keep all the holidays and all that stuff. Then you are practicing religious Jew, I guess, if you go to synagogue. But there's so many Jews that are secular Jews, and quite frankly, I don't really consider those people Jews. I mean, how can you be a secular Jew? Everything about Judaism is about the relationship to the Jewish people and their God. There would be no Judaism without the Jewish God at all. And from the beginning, God is the one who calls Abraham out of Mesopotamia. He's the one who changes Jacob's name to Israel. He's the one who brings the children of Israel out of Egypt as a nation. He's the one who gives Moses the law. I mean, I don't understand how you could be secular and be Jewish, because everything about being Jewish relates back to the Jewish God. But there are secular Jews, people who call themselves Jews and are secular. They don't believe in God. They don't even know the story of Hanukkah. Two of the most damning and frightening passages in the Bible. And there's a lot, but these two are really, we'll start with Revelation 3:9. Let me read that to you. Let me expand it. This is a ominous passage. Revelation 3:9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, but are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Those who say they are Jews, but who do lie, and who are not Jews, but who do lie, behold, I will make them come and worship. Synagogue of Satan. And then if you go back to Revelations 2:9, this same thing is repeated. Any biblical scholar will tell you the significance of this, that this is repeated again, that this is significant, that this is in chapter 2, and then in chapter 3, this is the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is the words of Jesus in the revelation to John, is what this is. This is 2:9, 2:9, Revelation. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those that say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So I wonder about some of these people who consider themselves secular Jews, because how can you be a secular Jew? I mean, how can you not believe in the Jewish God and be a Jew? How can you not know the story of Hanukkah? How could you think the Maccabees were hiding? Well, the thing is that that you need to know about the Maccabees, that just like Jesus in this story in John, when he is whipping the money changers out from in front of the temple that are taking advantage of people, that are preying on people and defiling the temple, those people that Jesus was at odds with, they were Jews. There were other Jews. They were the Jewish hierarchy, the Pharisees, and other rich Jews that were getting rich by taking advantage of people. But they were Jews. Well, who do you think the Maccabees were fighting? Yeah, the Maccabees were fighting Matthias Epiphanes and the Greeks. But the very first people that the Maccabees were fighting were Jews that had aligned themselves with the Greeks and were allowing the Greeks to defile the temple. Those are the very first people that the Maccabees went and fought, other Jews. Look it up. If you don't know the story, I mean, don't be ashamed that you don't know the story. Kamala Harris's Jewish husband don't know the story, but it's a very, very beautiful story about what these Maccabees did and regaining control of not only the temple, but their land. This comment is absolutely right. It's not a story of hiding, but winning a war. It's a story of faith and the reestablishing the Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. That's what the story is about. But there were some Jews that were hiding from the Maccabees. And the reason they were hiding from the Maccabees is because they had joined with the Greeks in defiling the temple. And the Maccabees went after them first. Before they even took the fight to the Greeks, they went after these Jews that had betrayed the temple. So we've been talking about, in the last couple of podcasts, about this secret document called Life After Death. And in the year 2000, this document was written, and it warned that the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 12 years. And they said that it was a crisis, and they had to do something to avert this crisis, is what the woman says that we listened to in this NPR clip. And we don't get this document, this secret document that was shared in 2000, where they warned that the United States was going to be completely debt-free. We don't get this document through a FOIA request. Actually, NPR is who sued to make this document public. It doesn't become public, until 2011. By that time, the national debt was close to $20 trillion. And right now, we are at about $35.4 trillion. When the document was written, this document, Life After Death, in 2000, the national debt was $4 trillion. $2 trillion of that was Social Security obligations. So we've been talking about this, and I've been using the term usury. That's what I've been telling you. I've been telling you that the reason that these guys saw the United States being completely debt-free is because they that there was going to be no more usury on the United States. That and usury is how banks make money. That's how bankers make money. The word usury is interest, but it has a negative connotation. If you look at the Wikipedia page here, it says that usury is the practice of making loans that are seen as unfairly enriching the lender. The term may be used in a moral sense, condemning taking advantage of others' misfortune, or in the legal sense where a interest rate is charged in excess of the maximum rate that is allowed by law. And usury has been illegal in many societies. It was illegal in Europe when the Catholic Church was very influential in the European kingdoms. Usury was illegal. I have a clip here about usury. I want you to take a listen to this.
No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. Words taken from St. Matthew's Holy Gospel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. The Merchant of Venice is considered one of Shakespeare's most famous plays. In a nutshell, the play is about a man named Antonio, who was a merchant from the Italian city-state of Venice. Antonio is a very joyful man who was always most generous, often lending money to his friends without ever charging any interest. As the play begins, one of Antonio's friends is desperately in need of a loan. And since Antonio has most of his money tied up in investments, he suggests that his friend get a loan from the local moneylender named Shylock. The Jewish character named Shylock practices something called usury, where he seeks to unlawfully gain profit through the lending of money. Shylock serves mammon, not God. Antonio, who provides interest-free loans, and Shylock, who is nothing but a loan shark, despise each other. Now Shylock agrees to provide a loan to Antonio's friend, but if the loan should go unpaid, Shylock demands that he be entitled to a pound of Antonio's own flesh as payment. Thinking that his investments will bear much fruit, Antonio agrees to this gruesome condition. Later on in the play, Antonio finds that all of the trading ships that he invested in may have sunk in the sea. Antonio seems to be in financial straits, and the loan is due. The cruel usurer Shylock will accept nothing but a pound of flesh from Antonio as payment. But it is only through that clever woman named Portia that Antonio was saved from this violent loss of his own flesh. Using a logical argument in court, Portia, dressed and disguised as a lawyer, states that Shylock can have a pound of flesh from Antonio, but that he must do it without causing the person Antonio to bleed. For the contract stated that Shylock was entitled only to flesh, but not to Antonio's blood. The play ends upon a joyous celebration with Antonio being set free, and even Antonio's trading ships returning almost miraculously to the port of harbor. This Shakespearean play has had great influence on Western society, including adding words or phrases literally to our vocabulary. The name of that usurious moneylender Shylock, for example, has become synonymous with a loan shark, or one who does not invest in productive ventures, but rather simply lends money to those who are in need, and he wants to seek a profit on top of that. Pound of flesh has also entered into our vocabulary as a slang for a very unpleasant debt that is owed. But the Merchant of Venice also brings up a topic of the evil and unjust practice of usury, which is not only condemned by sacred scripture and sacred tradition, but is also against the natural law itself. Let's consider an example. A member of the working class, the working poor, borrows $300 from modern-day Shylock firm, also known as payday lenders. After only 6 months, major fees accrue until the person ends up paying the usurious company $1,200 of wealth for the borrowing and using of only $300. Stories like this are actually very common in our present economic system, especially with the notion of what is called compound interest, which can increase profits and gain for usurers. Simple interest, for example, is only based on the principal amount of the loan, while compound interest is based on the principal amount of the loan and the accumulated interest on top of that. The act of declaring that somehow this interest is part of the initial loan itself is called compounding. Quick example. If you borrowed $2 at the time of Christ's birth at a 3% annual interest rate, after 2,000 years today, you would end up owing $122 in interest. But calculating the exact same figures using compound interest, however, brings far higher results. Again, borrowing $2 at the time of Christ's birth with a 3% annual interest rate, but this time compounded. After a period of just 1,000 years, there would be $20 trillion in interest owed. That's a lot of mammon. Consider this observation made by an economist. If the U.S. economy grows on average between 1.5% and 2% each year, which seems to be the average lately, and the interest that lenders charge even to governments is higher, say 3 or 4%, it is a mathematical fact that the wealth of those who lend money will make them much wealthier than society as a whole. And since lenders are typically of the wealthy class as opposed to the poor, usury always guarantees that the rich will always get richer and the poor will always get poorer. Because usury concentrates wealth into the hands of a few to the point that many have little or nothing, and so a welfare state has to be instituted to assist the poor. In other words, those in need of wealth, the poor, are required through usury to transfer the little funds they have to those with the greatest wealth, the usurers. And furthermore, usury often diverts real investment, which is good, away from productive activities such as manufacturing and farming, because various moneylenders can more easily gain greater wealth using usury, issuing non-productive loans where profit and gain is made on the loan itself. Now, the church's teaching, which is rarely spoken of today, the church's teaching against usury has been infallibly defined and confirmed over and over again, but especially in the papal letter by Pope Benedict XIV known as Vix Pervenit. In that papal encyclical, the Pope stated, quote, "The nature of the sin called usury has its proper place and its origin in a loan contract, which demands by its very nature that one return to another only as much as he has received." The Pope continues, "The sin rests on the fact that sometimes the creditor, the lender, desires more than he is given. But any gain which exceeds the amount he gave is illicit, illegal, and usurious," unquote.
So, I know that was a long clip. I wanted to play, and I still didn't play the entire video. I'll put it in the show notes if you want to watch the entire thing. But what you need to understand is the point that I'm trying to make is the last point that he made before I stopped it, is that it was illegal in the Catholic Church and in Catholic society in Europe, when the Catholic Church had great influence over the society in Europe. It was usury was illegal, and it was illegal because it was considered a sin, and it was against the Catholic Church. And so there were a lot of Jews that lived in Europe at this time in the Catholic Church, and because they were not Christian, they could practice usury because they weren't Christians. Now, I'm not being anti-Semitic or speaking out against Jews. In a lot of circumstances, the Knights Templar or one group that became very wealthy after the Crusades. And because the Knights Templar were Catholics, they were mystics, but they were Catholics, they would lend money and they would work with the Jews because the Jews could charge usury, and it would be the money from the Templars that the Jews were using to lend and charge usury, and it was a racket that they were running. But it made certain Jews in Europe very wealthy because they were being used by Christians to loan money because they were able to charge usury and skirt Catholic law. So a lot of these Jewish families became, very powerful banking families. Again, not being anti-Semitic. I'm here telling you history. I'm here telling you facts that at the heart of who these people are, didn't have anything to do with them being Jews or being Christians or what their ethnicity is or anything. These people are wicked. At the heart of it, they love money. And the Bible tells us that people who love money are responsible for a lot of the evil that you see in the world. The love of money. Love of money is responsible for a lot of evil that you see in this world. And so back to the story that we've been talking about, because we've been talking about the Bush-Clinton dynasty. And I've been telling you about what these guys did, how they set up the crash in 2008, the wealth transfer. It was an absolute wealth transfer, but there's more to it. But the money comes out of the public treasury. This money goes somewhere. It's $35 trillion. This money had to go someplace. And it was a wealth transfer. It comes out of the public treasury. We go into debt, and it goes into private hands. And it was a con. And that's what I've been telling you about, is about this con that they pulled off with the financial crisis, but not only with the financial crisis, also with handling the crisis that they foresaw, that the United States was going to be debt-free in 12 years, and they needed to rectify that, which they did. And you may say that the stuff that I'm talking about here is conspiratorial and all of that. Proof's in the pudding. It's right there. $35 trillion. That's what when this document, here's the document right here. When this document was written, life after debt, warning that the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 12 years, the national debt was $4 trillion with Social Security obligations. Now it's $35 trillion. You can say I'm being conspiratorial or whatever. Proof is in the pudding. Look at that. So what would you do? How would you, if you saw that the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 12 years and you wanted to rectify that, how would you do that? What would you do? What did they do? So we've been talking about the Bush-Clinton dynasty, been talking about what these guys did. And we've only talked about the Clinton administration and Bush's part so far. We haven't gotten into Obama. Can't wait to tell you about Obama's part. Obama's part's the best part. But the Bush-Clinton dynasty, starting with the 4 years of the patriarch, George H.W. Bush, and then you include the 4 years of the current administration, 32 out of the 36 years the Bush-Clinton dynasty has ruled over us. And this guy ruled over us and was the president of the United States and governed over us for 4 years. And they're telling you that this guy's 4 years are why there's so much division in this country. Kamala Harris's favorite word is and talking point is, it's time to turn the page. It's time to turn the page. Let's come together. These powerful people are trying to divide us. She's talking about this guy in his 4 years. It's all his fault. He's the one trying to divide us. She's running on change. And this is what Obama ran on in 2008. He ran on change. Obama pretended like he was running against the Bush-Clinton dynasty. And for people like me, see, that's the thing about Obama. And there's a lot of differences, even though Kamala Harris is running on this change platform and trying to run the same campaign as Barack Obama ran in 2008. As I've noted, there's tons of differences. I mean, one difference that just smacks you in the face is that Kamala Harris is the current vice president. It's kind of hard to run on change when you're part of the current administration. At least Obama was running against his cousin in 2008. I mean, but nobody knew it. Nobody knew that Obama was conning us because he was good at it. Obama was a great orator, and he would speak, and for someone who was under his spell for a short period of time while he was running in 2008, I will tell you that he would speak and he would say things, and you'd be like, "Wow, this guy's so brilliant. He's just what we need at this time." I mean, Obama is the guy that he's going to bring us together. He's going to unite this country. He made you believe that. He was good at it. Kamala Harris doesn't have that. Kamala Harris is not a great orator. Nobody listens to her and say, "Oh my God, that was so profound." No one says that about her. So that's another difference. There's a lot of differences, but that's what she's running on. She's running on change you can't believe in. And some new polling has come out and is showing. This new NBC poll just came out over the weekend, and it seems like her rhetoric and running on turning the page and that she's the candidate, according to this poll, it's working. This was a question in the poll: which candidate is better representing change? And it's 47% Kamala Harris. She's still below 50%, but only 38% believe Trump represents change. And I guess that's fair. Trump has been president before, but 47% thinks she represents change. She's the current vice president. What's wrong with you people? I want you to listen to Man Bun here. This was that Oprah Winfrey town hall that she did last week, and I want you to listen to what he says.
I haven't seen anything like this since 2008.
Yep.
When President Obama was elected. And when he got elected, it was about a newness and a hope. This time, it's about an exuberance and an excitement that you only get from hard-fought wins and hard-fought losses and knowing what's at stake. And that's why we're not going back.
So Man Bun says that, that he hasn't seen anything like this since 2008, that since change you can't believe in, that she's the change candidate now. She's running on turning the page and bringing us all together just like Obama. And he says that he hasn't seen anything like this since Obama. And I want you to listen to some of those things that Kamala Harris is saying in this town hall. Take a listen.
Welcome to hello, Madam Vice President. Hello. Welcome to Michigan.
It's so good to be back. And Governor, thank you for everything you are and everything you do for the state. Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
can you see this? We have 1,000 screens
goodness.
here representing people from all over the country.
Hi, everyone.
Can you
Hi, everyone.
Can you feel it? Can you feel
I can.
the joy rising in here?
The joy.
I can, and I have to tell you, there's so much that I love about our campaign because it really is about the people. And I look around at these screens, Oprah, I look at who's in the room, and this is America.
This is
America. You know, I was saying with a group of friends earlier, I think in this moment where we've dealt with so much that I think is quite exhausting around powerful forces that would try and divide us and try us.
Powerful forces that would try to divide us. Powerful forces. Powerful forces. All the powerful forces are endorsing her. All the powerful forces. All the powerful forces. The banking forces, the corporate forces, the entertainment. She's got all of this town hall that she's doing has got all these celebrities and Hollywood elite. I mean, she's being endorsed by everybody. 200 former Republicans from the Bush and Romney and McCain campaigns and administrations, from the Bush, Herbert Walker administration, alumni from his administration, Dick Cheney, Republicans, all the way up to Dick Cheney. She's got all of them. She's got all the banking elite, Goldman Sachs. She's got BlackRock, but powerful forces that are trying to divide us. Who is she talking about? She's talking about this guy. This guy, powerful forces that are trying. This guy's already been shot once. There are people trying to kill him. He had a second assassination attempt just last week. These powerful forces that are trying to divide us is what she's saying. This is what she's talking about. And it's working. It seems to be working. Listen a little more.
America, I was saying with a group of friends earlier, I think in this moment where we've dealt with so much that I think is quite exhausting around powerful forces that would try and divide us and try us to have us as Americans pointing fingers at each other.
Yes.
That this movement that is about reminding each other that we have so much more in common than what separates us is so critically important. And this is about the strength of who we are as Americans. And this movement that we're in about, as I like to say, seeing in the face of a stranger a neighbor.
Yes.
Right?
An
extension of love
yes.
literally in the face of a stranger, see a neighbor.
Yes.
And approach each other with that level of dignity and grace and kindness.
Well, that's exactly what happened with the win with Black women.
So, listen, it's so much fluff, but she's talking about, yes, people are sick of the division and our country being so divided, but she's going to fix all that? If she's going to fix all that, where's she been for the past 3.5 years? But that's the campaign that she's running, that let's turn the page, let's all come together, let's all be kumbaya and be united. And I started to think about, listening to this and looking at these new poll numbers where she's seen as more of the change agent than Donald Trump. And, in this poll, it also showed that she's leading Trump by 5 points for the first time since they've been polling this election, going back to polls that they've done when it was Trump and Biden. For the first time, Democrats are leading now that she's the candidate in this particular NBC poll. So I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking to myself, people are sick of the division in this country and the country being, in like these political tribes, these political, we're at each other's throats, and the country is absolutely divided. And I started thinking, has this country, and I'm a bit of a historian, I know a little bit about history, I study history, I love history. Has this country ever been divided before? Yes, this country's been divided before. Going back to, again, the Civil War, but how divided the country was leading up to the Civil War over the issue of slavery, over the issue of the Western expansion. Tons of political issues that have divided this country going back to this country's founding. But then I started to think to myself, when has this country ever been united? When are some of the moments in this country that the country has been the most united? Well, some of those times may have been after huge wars. The country was hugely united at the end of World War II when we had finally won that war. I don't want to say after the Civil War that we were united, because we were not united after the Civil War. The country was still very much divided after the Civil War. I can't think of, we'll talk about the moment in time that I believe, looking back through all of American history, the moment in time that the United States was the most divided. Unarguably, the period of time where the United States was most divided. But before we get there, I want you to listen to Steve Konacki and Kristen Welker talk about this latest NBC poll. And this leads us into where I want to go.
And then there's this. The view, the overall perception of Kamala Harris. Remember, before she got in the race, a lot of talk that, her numbers didn't look better than Biden's. She was 32 positive, 50 negative before getting in this race. And now this is what you see.
And we have to pause here because this is the largest increase that we have seen for any politician since George W. Bush in the wake of the September 11th attacks on this issue.
Absolutely, Kristen. I mean, we were seeing numbers like this for years for Kamala Harris. Now you're seeing a very different story. And what goes into...
Do you understand what Kristen Welker just said and what they're talking about? They're saying that this is the largest from negative to positive change that any politician has had since NBC's been taking these polls going back to the 1950s, at least the 1950s, maybe even before that. This is the largest change from negative to positive in this amount of time, in a short amount of time, that has ever happened since George W. Bush after 9/11. After 9/11. Now, George W. Bush, when he was elected on the day that he was sworn in, there was tons of protests in Washington. There were tons of signs that read "Hail to the Thief" because George W. Bush was made president after a 5-4 Supreme Court decision. You remember the Florida recount. If you're a millennial or Gen Z, you don't remember any of this stuff, but look it up. There, in the 2000 election, there was this huge scandal in Florida where George W. Bush's brother was governor, and there was a recount there, and the Supreme Court stopped the recount. This is in short. They stopped the recount and they made George W. Bush president of the United States. So when he's sworn in on January 20th, there's tons of protests. There were people that say that he stole it. His approval rating was in the tank when he first came in.Maybe had just under 50% of the country supporting him. And then after 9/11, this guy in one day goes from a approval rating that is hovering around 45% to a 90% approval rating. 90% of the country backed him after and approved of him as president of the United States after September 11th. The day after September 11th and the time after September 11th, in those weeks, in those months after September 11th, I would argue with anyone to try to name a moment in time where the United States was more united than after September 11th. And then, today, when you look back, a lot of people like to say that the hardcore partisan divisions that we see in this country go back to the end of the Clinton administration and the impeachment of Clinton over the Monica Lewinsky scandal and all of that, and Clinton being impeached, that really drove the nation apart and divided the nation. But 9/11 happened a year later or months later, maybe over a year later. And so even despite the Clinton scandal and that driving the nation apart because of that impeachment, and even after Bush v. Gore and Florida recount and George Bush being sworn in under the circumstances of that election, even after all of that division, after we were attacked on 9/11, we all came together. We're all united more than any other time in American history. The 9/11 attacks united us. One of the darkest days in American history. Now, again, I asked the question, if you saw that the United States was going to be completely debt-free just a year before the 9/11 attacks, or even who knows how long before this that they realized this is just when the document comes out. What would you do? What would you do? How would you take the United States from $4 trillion in debt to $35 trillion in debt? So 9/11 is the moment in time that the United States was the most divided. Not only the United States, the world was divided. It was united around the United States after 9/11. So many members of other countries, everyone, Russia, everyone had our back. Everyone was united. The entire world was united. Not only the United States was united after the September 11 attacks. So how do we go from being the most united that the United States had ever been in the history of the country after September 11 to being as divided as we are today? You're telling me it's this guy's fault? You're telling me it's this guy's fault? You really believe that? That we went from being the most united that we have ever been in the history of this country after 9/11 to being as divided as we are today. And it's this guy's fault? That's what Kamala Harris wants you to believe? That's what she's saying? And we need to turn the page. We need to all just come together. La, 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 la. Oh, just come together. Turn the page. These powerful people trying to divide us. Powerful people trying to divide us. What happened? How did the United States go from being the most united after a huge tragedy like this to being as divided as we are today? This guy played a role. This guy played a role because this guy did not want to have a 90% approval rating. It's better for him to govern the way that he wants to govern with an approval rating around 50%. It benefited for him because it's divide and conquer. So this guy took us from a place where we were the most united that we had ever been in the history of this country, and then he started the build up to the war in Iraq. He's the one who not only divided the country, he turned the world against us. He turned the world against us by taking us into Iraq illegally. This protest event that happened in February, just a month before Bush started the war in Iraq, this was a global protest. This was one of the largest protests that the world had ever seen, and it was an anti-war protest against the war in Iraq. There was protests going on everywhere, not only here in the United States. They were going on in England because Tony Blair and Bush were in cahoots, and they were the ones trying to get the Security Council resolution. So they were protesting in England. They were protesting in here in the United States. They were protesting all over Europe, and everybody was protesting for peace. They wanted peace. So after 9/11, when the United States and the world were more united than ever, Bush is starting to divide us. He's starting to turn the world against us by taking us to the war in Iraq. Read a little bit about this protest on February 15th, 2003. On 15 February 2003, a coordinated day of protest was held across the world, which people in more than 600 cities expressed opposition to the imminent Iraq war. It was part of a series of protests and political events that had begun in 2002 and continued as the invasion and war and occupation took place. So on this particular day, this was a huge protest around the world. And I mean, it was millions upon millions of people protesting the imminent invasion of Iraq. People were calling for peace. And this is how you see the division. I would start getting divided. Not only in the country, the world. This was a press conference that Bush gave, I think a day or two after that massive global protest where millions of people around the world are protesting what he's getting ready to do in the invasion of Iraq. I want you to take a listen to what Bush says.
Thank you, Mr. President. What do you make of the fact that Millions of people across the globe have taken to the streets to protest your approach to Iraq. And if you decide to go to war, how do you wage a campaign in the face of such stiff opposition?
2 points. One is that democracy is a beautiful thing, and that people are allowed to express their opinion. And I welcome people's right to say what they believe. Secondly, evidently some in the world don't view Saddam Hussein as a risk to peace. I respectfully disagree.
Fool. They see you as a risk to peace. You are the one who is a risk to peace, not Saddam Hussein. You.
People's right to say what they believe. Secondly, evidently some in the world don't view Saddam Hussein as a risk to peace. I respectfully disagree. Saddam Hussein has gassed his own people. Saddam Hussein has got weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein has has defied the United Nations. Saddam Hussein is providing links to terrorists. Saddam Hussein is a threat to America.
So he had his mind made up. There was nothing anyone can do. Millions of people marching, tearing the nation apart after we were so united after 9/11. He was content on taking us to war in Iraq, and there was no evidence behind any of the stuff that he said, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam Hussein had a nuclear program. The entire presentation that Colin Powell did in front of the Security Council, he later says that he regrets that he took part in that. I don't particularly buy that from Colin Powell, but that's what he said. But it was all based on lies. And this guy was taking us to war, dividing the country, dividing the world. Now, I ask the question again. If you were in 2000 writing a document saying that, warning that the United States was going to be completely debt-free, that we have to do something so the United States doesn't become completely debt-free because this is a crisis, what would you do? How would you avert that crisis of the United States being completely debt-free? Would you take us to war? Because a war is a great way to run up debt. You can run up debt really fast in a war. Would you cut taxes at the same time you took us to war? Because if you take us to war and you cut taxes while you take us to war, you can definitely run up the debt. By doing that, that's a great way to run up the debt. So one thing you need to understand, and I'm almost done. One thing you need to understand about what Bush did in Iraq, he didn't just invade Iraq. After he invaded Iraq, he created an insurgency. Iraq is mostly Shia Muslims. But when Saddam Hussein ruled over Iraq, his minority, Sunni, the Ba'athist Party, ruled over the majority of the Shia that lived there. And the Shia that lived in Iraq were aligned with the Ayatollah in Iran because Iran is Shia. So when Bush invades, after he invades, there was all of this anticipation of what's going to come next. They pulled down the statue of Saddam, but they put an American flag over his face first. And that's giving a sign of conquest that these people are here to conquer us. And then they take down the American flag and then put an Iraqi flag up over his face, because the whole message was that we're here as liberators. At the end of this thing, in the security councils, after the inspectors were called out, they didn't find anything just before Bush invades. Bush started to change the reason behind the invasion. At first, he was saying weapons of mass destruction, nuclear program, there's a 1% chance, all this stuff. But once the inspectors had been in Iraq for a few months, and it was obvious that there were no weapons of mass destruction there, and Bush wasn't going to get his resolution for war, he started to say, we're going in to liberate Iraq. And the mission was called Operation Iraqi Liberation at first, but then they realized that the acronym of Operation Iraqi Liberation spelled oil, so they changed it to Operation Iraqi Freedom. But the whole mission was to liberate. So when we go in, we can't show that we're there to conquer. So that's why they removed the American flag and put the Iraqi flag there, because we're here to liberate. And at first, the Iraqi people, they weren't attacking us. We didn't have any casualties in the invasion at all. After we, had gotten rid of Saddam's Revolutionary Guard, many of them had dissipated into the population, and the invasion was easy. But after the invasion, the Bush administration created the insurgency, and they created the insurgency with the de-Baathification order. And the de-Baathification order is where they told all of the Sunni, this minority of Sunni that had ruled over the Shia with the Ba'athist party, people that were professionals that had worked all their lives for their pensions, people that were teachers, people that knew how to administrate the civil society. All those people, they were immediately fired in the de-Baathification order, and that created the insurgency. And what I'm trying to get you to understand, if the problem is you don't have debt, you're not going to build debt by just invading Iraq. You have to get the insurgency going. You have to get the Iraqis to start fighting you, so then you can get the war going. Because the invasion was just the invasion. It wasn't a war yet. We just invaded. The Iraqis were just waiting to see what happens next. Who's going to, be the new administrators, and we're not going to fight the Americans. But Bush forced the fight with the de-Baathification order. I don't have a lot of time. I just want to play a little bit of this clip about the de-Baathification order, and then we'll get back into this in the next podcast.
Bremer carried with him a plan devised by Rumsfeld deputy Douglas Feith to treat Iraq like Nazi Germany, to remove all members of Saddam's Ba'ath party from their positions.
I'm walking down the hall, and Ambassador Robin Rayfield says, "Have you seen this?" She has a piece of paper. I said, "No, what is it?" She says, "De-Baathification order." I said, "Wow." So I read it, and real quick, there in the hall room, I said, "This is too deep."
He was very, very, very angry. And Jay's very personal. His head he was walking fast-paced all over. I could tell he was very upset about it.
Garner had briefed Rumsfeld on de-Baathification. He had briefed Condi Rice on de-Baathification. And he had, I thought, a fairly cold-hearted but realistic assessment, which is the Baathists are an Iraqi problem, and more or less let the Iraqis take care of it. They know who the really bad guys are, and they will kill them. And he was pretty content to let that happen.
So we went in and we talked to Ambassador Bremer for a few minutes, and I said, this is too deep. I said, give Charlie and I about 45 minutes to an hour. Let us digest this thing. And then let us recommend some changes to you, and come back here and we'll get on the phone with Rumsfeld and see if we can't soften this a bit.
And Bremer kind of says, look, you don't understand. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not asking for your advice.
J. Paul Bremer was Bush's envoy. He was speaking for George Bush in Iraq.
And they argue a bit more. And finally, Bremer says, look, I have my orders. This is what I'm doing.
I have my orders.
And so I said, well, Charlie, what do you think?
I have my orders.
To the best of my memory, Charlie said, well, if you do this, you're going to drive 30 to 50,000 Baathists underground by nightfall, and the number's closer to 50 than it is 30.
He may have come in and spoken to me at great length about it. I just don't remember it. Honestly, don't remember it.
You don't remember these guys coming in and saying, this is 30 to 50,000 people, and my God, what are you doing?
I just, yeah. I was working 20 hours a day in that period as well, and this wasn't the only thing on my list of things to do the first 5 days I was there.
But this is a big one, right?
There were a lot of big things that first 5 days. There were a lot of big things the first 48 hours, so I don't remember every meeting. I don't say it didn't happen. I knew there were concerns. I knew the agency made the assessment that there were about 20,000 people to be thrown out of work, and I judged in the end that was a risk we were willing to take.
We have and will.
I think, frankly, there wasn't a single person in the CPA who understood what Order Number 1 meant. It created a climate where people could be expelled as university teachers or grade school teachers, not simply people who had some kind of tie to the senior structure.
Two reasons we wanted to keep the Ba'athist Party intact. One, the only folks have experience running the government. so we needed to keep them. Number two, the Sunnis need to have a voice. And if you don't give people a voice, they have relatively few options. And what the Middle Eastern history and Middle Eastern, what it tells us, their next option is violence.
And then, 7 days later, another decisive and controversial announcement, CPA Order Number 2, the decision to dissolve the Iraqi military.
Now you have a couple 100,000 people who are armed, because they took their weapons home with them, who know how to use the weapons, who have no future, and have a reason to be angry at you.
Who knows how many folks who got disgruntled and went to the other side. I will tell you this, 72 hours after the decision was made, the first major attack from the airport road took place.
So 72 hours after they disband the Iraqi military and do the de-Baathification order, the insurgency started. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the insurgency started because once the insurgency starts, that's when the cost plus contracts start. That's when the money and the cash register starts flowing, and it becomes a war. It wasn't a war after the invasion. It didn't become a war until Bush's policy in Iraq to force the insurgency. And that was all to get the debt going. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed the program. I will see you on Friday, and hope you have a great week.